Hi.
Hello.
Welcome back to the Sprawl.
The Sprawl, Sprawlers.
Yeah, let me take off the headphones. There's like a massive delay and I'm so confused by it.
Now I'm confused by it too.
Yeah, it's just like an echo. Echo.
Great. So, subject today, Sprawlers, is hyperviolence in TV and film. How has violence developed since, say, the 90s to now? And why is the question we'll be asking. Now, we don't know the answers, but we are going to try and put our spin on it. So, yeah.
So, where do we start? When I start with... I think it's easy to talk about film this way, or... I can talk more about the film side of things. You can talk more about...
Sure. Well, I mean,
TV.
if you look at television and how far it's come in terms of what can be shown. In America, I still think it's ridiculous that they allow all the sex and violence you like, but when it comes to swear words, they get, you know, a bit funny. It's silly. The censorship in America is full of strange, like...
censorship?
Yeah.
Rules?
Oh, what's
standards
the word?
Standards and practices?
No, you know when two things are the exact opposite. There's something ironic about it anyway. You know, violence is a big deal in America, yet they tend to have TV shows which will show some really gory, harsh violence. You know?
Yes.
I mean, even their more basic non you know, after watershed shows, I don't know what they are in America, but like the cable shows, HBO for example, which makes things like Game of Thrones and Westworld and all of that, they are now in a very different place, but the violence side of things has remained constant. It's like it's basically, I've been watching Spartacus recently.
Yeah.
I'm rewatching Spartacus for maybe like the 8th time. Now, Spartacus is a brilliant show. It's
Why is it brilliant?
Well, it's filmed in Australia, New Zealand. That's Australia and New Zealand. But it uses Australian actors. The writing is really interesting and complex, and it sort of did what Game of Thrones has done now, but before Game of Thrones. So there's lots of deception, everyone's playing a game to rise in power, there's a lot of knockbacks and a lot of knock forwards. You know, everything just seems to be fated to tragedy. And what Spartacus does really well is, from the beginning, it takes this premise, this slave who is taken by the Romans and beaten and thrust into becoming a gladiator through no, you know, desire of his own, and then he becomes the leader of a slave rebellion, which actually happened in 71 BC. So the show follows, you know, a sort of linear path. You know where it's going to end, but what makes it the most interesting is how hyper-violent the show is. You can't go a scene without someone like fucking or you know, or having their throat slit,
or like this, have a bucket of CGI blood just in your face.
Yeah, there's always blood. Blood is everywhere, and it sort of makes me think, because I'm a fan of horror films, and I'm sure if we're talking about hyperviolence, we'll get onto some horror films in a bit. But the thing is that I watch it now, and I just find it impressive. And is that the intention of the blood and the gore? Is it to be impressive? And what do you think? You've seen bits and pieces of it.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, this is not so much to do with Spartacus itself, but with gladiators, because, you know, watching that was a big form of entertainment. You know, back in the good old days of Rome.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, is it any different now to watch people being chopped up on TV than it was to see it live in an arena?
Well, it's probably safer and less harmful. But the thing is that, you know, there is a lot of rage in our society, and that's healthy. You know, we need to have an outlet of ways, or like I think some violent media can be good for us. I mean, I know from the perspective of video games, for instance, there's been many claims that violent video games makes gamers violent, which has been proven over and over again isn't the case, and might in fact be the inverse. That violent games can make people less violent.
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly know that if I'm having a bit of a rage, I like to play a fighting game, and I will fight until I lose, and then I'll get tired of it, and I'll feel somewhat more satisfied that I let it out on something imaginary. You know, video games are interesting in that respect, because to be interesting now and to cater to the market that a lot of game designers think they are catering to, they tend to you know, make the protagonist a grizzly bearded typical heroic man, and
Always a man.
it's not always a man. I mean, you look at is it Samus? Samus.
From Metroid Prime.
Yeah.
I think it's Samus.
No, it's Samus.
Is it Samus?
The guy on
It's a girl.
yeah.
Yeah.
The guy on
Woman.
Super Smash
Girl.
Brothers goes Samus. So it's definitely Samus. That's
Great
right.
games though, Metroid Prime. all
Yeah,
of
but
them.
I mean, you know, like Nintendo were doing little things like that for a long while. Like when Metroid came out for the first time, the last screen would be, you know, if you'd done well, would be a reveal of Samus as a woman. But you had been playing the game completely without the knowledge that she's a woman, you know, and that was I think she was maybe the first proper heroine in gaming.
The last time I saw a twist like that was probably Smack My Bitch Up by the Prodigy.
Oh, what's playing in the background, by the way?
Oh, right now we're listening to Can. Oh, lovely Can. Some good old school krautrock.
Yeah.
And it's Tago Mago, side A currently. It's this album is about someone going insane, and music is following that, and it just goes from A to B into like complete insanity. And transition is so subtle.
The album art is really interesting because, yeah, it tells that story even before you put it on the player. The reason I picked it is because brains. And what's more hyper-violent than something happening to a brain visually, you know? I mean...
Like being sliced up?
I'm not squeamish at all. As I say, I watch a lot of horror films, and one horror film which made me feel a bit sick to my stomach is Wrong Turn 5, which I think is the one. It might be 4, it might be 6, God knows, there's so many of them. But this is the one where there's a bunch of convicts, and yeah, you've got the main mutant villain inbred dude called Three Fingers, and he literally chops the guy's skull off. The guy's still alive. It's a bit like Cannibal, and just like starts chopping up bits of his brain, and that really makes me feel sick. The idea of someone eating my brain is just foul, and genuinely made me nauseous to watch.
Well, that sort of sounds like what's it, Green Inferno by Eli Roth?
Which was based on Cannibal Holocaust.
Which is
It's sort of a love letter to Cannibal Holocaust, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, who writes love letters to that film?
I don't know. I mean, Cannibal Holocaust did do something right in that it was one of the first found footage films to make people really believe this stuff had happened. The director was put on trial in Italy because it's the picture they use on the front of most of the Cannibal Holocaust boxes of the woman being impaled and the pole coming out of her mouth. And people were so convinced that was real that they put the director on trial for having the snuff film, so they actually had to fly the actors in to prove that they were still alive. But Cannibal Holocaust is it's one of those movies that have shock value, and it is shocking, and it has aged quite well because you watch it now and it's still pretty sickening. Cannibals were always a scary thing for me growing up. I mean, I'm personally a big fan of zombies.
Well, you know, there's a lot of weird protein folding diseases that you can get by eating human flesh.
Well, I'm not intending to eat human flesh when I say they were a thing for me. I mean, I was really scared of them. Zombies used to freak me out as well. And now I'm a big fan of the use of the taboo in fiction. Would you eat human flesh, Petar, if you had to? It's one of those tricky questions.
I don't know. I guess what kind of sauce or dressing we put on top of it?
Ranch.
Like what's the side dish?
Fries.
Fries and ranch dip on some human flesh.
Exactly.
Is it like medium rare? Is it like a steak or is it like?
I don't know. I suppose it'd have to be well done because we're disease carriers.
Oh, but that's because we eat everything. It
That's
like
true.
all like comes back to us.
We are. Well, I can't believe we're having a conversation about whether we'd be cannibals. I would like to think that I would sacrifice myself for the greater good. Don't hold me to this. If I'm ever in a situation with you, don't hold me to this. But I would say like, let me die naturally, and then you can eat me.
So, sorry to interrupt, but I got a reference in my head.
What?
To this episode. Well, it's an episode of The Simpsons where, do you remember when? So Itchy and Scratch is a super violent, hyper-violent TV show within a TV show. It's a cartoon that they watch and it's great. And do you remember the episode where Marge convinces? How does she do it? Anyway, she gets the creators of Itchy and Scratch to change the show, make it.
Yeah,
non-violent.
She complains, and I think she forms one of those mothers against something group.
Yeah. And there's like we see a completely tame version of Itchy and Scratchy, and we just have Lisa and the Bart get angry.
Lemonade, please.
And then Lisa goes, "So it's true. Some cartoons do make children violent," and punch their brother.
No, it's true. Human beings, I think, do need outlets for violence. I mean, some of the biggest sports on the planet, boxing, MMA now actually, and all that stuff is no different from the gladiators of old, except they don't kill each other. And in some cases they do kill each other. It just takes a lot longer because they're giving each other brain damage and growing up to be growing old to be mentally challenged and things like that.
Yeah, and also they're not slaves.
Well, no, they're not slaves. They choose to do it, but they choose to do it for the same reasons the gladiators. I mean, one of the things that's very clear in Spartacus is that a lot of the gladiators seem to think it an honor to be trained as gladiators and to fight in the arena and to die. Crixus will die. A glorious death in the arena. It's what I long for. Yes, Dominus.
Crixus has so many like gazing shots where he just looks like he's about to have one tear fall down his chin.
Well, it's true, yeah. Manu Bennett does a very good job of looking longingly into the distance while he thinks of, the glory I've lost, or Nivea. I think you should go out and watch an episode of Spartacus now just to appreciate how good my impression of Crixus is, because it's fucking good.
Eek, that's pretty close to the microphone there.
I'm sorry.
It might, scare some people, startle them.
Well,
even.
that's the whole point, right? So, hyperviolence. In other shows, the development has been interesting because you watch a show that's being produced by the same producer, Sam Raimi.
Yeah.
Xena Warrior Princess Hercules, set in the same era. Yeah. Lucy Lawless is, I think, Rob Tapert's. He also produced Xena and Hercules' wife, and she's from New Zealand, which always shocked me until I realised that makes complete sense because the show was always always had people with wobbly American accents on it.
Yeah.
Xena and Hercules, yeah.
How wobbly?
Well, the extras. I mean, Lucy Lawless's American accent is pretty spot on, but the extras that they would get from New Zealand would always be told, oh yeah, you have to have an American accent now, and then they would sound a bit like they were I don't know, well, they would sound like they hadn't lived in America for a while. Let's put it that way. Like they would do their best.
I think it's really interesting when you have a case of really good impersonation of an accent, but not quite there. Like, remember Carnage?
Yeah.
Remember Christoph Waltz's American accent? With the occasional, like, the German, like, like, brytning, how do you say that? A twang coming out.
Twang, yes. Is it
it
brytning in Swedish?
Well, it's sort of like an accent or dialect. It's brytning
Well,
or
there
like...
was a guy I went to school with college with who was English but lived in America for a long time and then had returned to England to come to college. So his accent would sound like this, and it would come out very English sometimes, and then would go back into, oh my god. But the thing is, there was no like middle ground. The accents didn't mix. They were just two different accents trying to fight for dominance in this guy's voice. So it would always be really strange.
So hey, I'm gonna switch the record.
Switch away.
But we watched a film that was quite violent recently, The Bad Batch.
Oh yes. So for anyone who doesn't know, Netflix at the moment is bringing out a shit ton of new stuff. It's crazy actually. There seems to be a new show on there every day. And I've watched a couple of these films. We watched Gerald's Game, we watched The Bad Batch, we watched 1922, all of which have violence in some capacity.
But I think I don't think it's fair to compare them. But just because they're on Netflix doesn't mean they have anything in common.
No, that's not the point. But they all are violent films. They all have violent parts to them, and you know they all are very different in the way they present that violence. Now, The Bad Batch has Jason Momoa in it, Keanu Reeves, Jason Momoa. Did I say Jason Momoa?
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves, Jim Carrey.
Who's the... I'm so bad with their names, but the director of this film is very interesting. Anna Oh, wait.
The point is, it's a beautiful film. It really is like stunning to watch because the imagery is. I mean, it's a hyper-violent film for sure, but at no point is the violence off-putting. Like it should be. There are moments in it where you should be cringing away, but it's shot in such a way where you don't need to look away. You know, you sort of... There's a bit right at the beginning, and I don't really want to spoil it, but...
Oh. May you say the director's name is Anna Lili Amirpour? Amirpour. She made A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night previously.
But there's one thing that cannot be argued, and that's that all the characters in the film are interesting. They all have their own motives, and they all have their own reason for doing the things they do, and it's just to try and survive in this desert, wilderness, post-apocalyptic area where the Bad Batch reside, yes.
Yep. Very many Mad Max vibes.
Definitely,
Max
definitely. But I mean, the thing about Mad Max is that it's, I mean, there's another film with hyper-violence, but Mad Max is over the top in so many other ways that the violence seems to make sense for it. And sometimes you can watch something where the violence doesn't make any sense. Like, I watched, I'm trying to think, Saw, for example, okay? The first Saw film was perfect in that it didn't push more buttons than it needed to. There was a mystery, you saw some people who had been killed by the Jigsaw Killer, and then you had these two guys stuck in this room with this dead man, and one of them had to saw off the foot. And that's a really simple concept as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the twist was pretty great as well.
Yeah, it was back then. I mean, now you look back on it and you think...
Plus, if you look online, you can find the short film the directors made of Saw that turned into Saw eventually. And what's interesting in there is they have a smaller budget, of course, and you can see more of the style of Saw. And, you know, they kind of like... I think something about the editing and all the flashes and the sound design which makes Saw feel grosser. Like, for instance, there's a famous hobbling scene in Misery, which that scene would not work without the sound.
No, but I mean, in Misery, the psychological horror is far greater than the physical horror. So when those moments happen, they are shocking. When if you haven't seen Misery, then more for you. But when the sheriff comes to the house and knocks on the door, and then gets shot in the back, it's horrible because you've watched him and the relationship he has with his wife.
That'd be a spoiler warning.
And look, if you haven't seen Misery, which came out in 1990, the year I was born, like I say, more for you. It's a great film, so watch it. But you watch the relationship with the sheriff and his wife, and it's lovely, and they're really sweet people. And then you watch this horrible thing happen to him, and it's horrible, and it's shocking for all the right reasons. You're not going, oh, did they need to do that? Yes, they needed to do that. You needed to see the horror in the moment. Coming back to Spartacus just briefly.
Yeah. Go for it.
Just gonna say that the thing about the show is that the entire style is based on this hyperviolence. So when you have it all the time, it either has to one-up itself or it has to remain consistent. Otherwise, it gets boring to watch. Spartacus also has a linguistic element in that it's about there's a lot of talking in it as well. So you're interested in those talking bits, but it's all leading up to yet another fight, another battle, another bloody end for someone, another tragic death, something, and it's non-stop.
Something dark side. Something complete.
Exactly. What was I gonna say? So yeah, like The Bad Batch is one I would incredibly recommend because it again, in the same way that Misery does it, it knows how to use the violence in the right ways, and it's not in the same shocking way. It's just somehow the film allows you to become accustomed to its style of violence without it being the main factor of the storytelling.
Okay, so I sort of really want to talk about Mother. Maybe we should save it for a whole episode because it gets pretty violent. But I just remembered a really gory brain slicing scene from, I think it's the first Underworld film. Mm-hmm. Do you remember did you watch that?
No.
Oh, it's terrible, but it's also amazing because it's terrible naturally.
Well, haven't they made like 17 of them? Like a ridiculous amount of Underworld films.
They're based on a game.
I didn't know that.
Is the game based on the... No, it can't be. In any case, it's worse for it, regardless of whichever direction it went.
I don't know. Everyone likes watching a woman kick ass, though, don't they?
Yeah, but the final boss of the film ends up in a pretty gruesome way, and I'll show it for you. It's like there's a sword that goes, and then the brain just kind of goes, and then goes like.
Okay.
Bow.
What about Kill Bill's brain slicey death? She gets. But the interesting thing about that brain death is that it's not physically possible for the way the skull was sliced to be sliced in that way. So you see the top of her skull, and then there's like proper brain, but the sword would have just gone through the brain and chopped that off too.
But you know what? Of course, Quentin Tarantino.
Wait. But sorry, just to interrupt, just while we're on the subject. The Quentin Tarantino recently came out and said that Kill Bill and Inglourious Basterds were the sort of films that they would watch in the universe of Reservoir Dogs and Inglourious... Wait, not Inglourious Basterds. Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction.
And probably...
the product placement of the cigarettes
Jackie Brown.
Are from outside the universe. So Kill Bill's a film made for the people of the Pulp Fiction universe.
So everyone smokes apple red, right? But do you smoke apple red in Kill Bill?
There's an ad for it in Kill Bill.
So it's like product placement.
Yeah. But it's really clever when you think about it. So you go back and you watch some Quentin Tarantino film, who is a master of hyperviolence.
Oof. But like Tarantino's one, like if you're against violence, you haven't seen a Tarantino film just because it's so cool.
Cool, yeah.
I don't know. It's visceral, but it's just so stylized and it's almost poetic.
Well, I mean, when you watch Kill Bill, yeah, there's certainly a poetry to it. But if you watch The Hateful Eight, for example, the violence in there is incredibly visceral, but I wouldn't call it poetic necessarily.
No, but that film has some great tension and fantastic wind ambience. So many layers of wind.
Oh. We went to see The Hateful Eight. I wouldn't actually mind rewatching that film at some point at the cinema. So yeah, we had the full sound experience. Did we see it on the 70mm in IMAX?
No.
Which film did we go see 70mm in IMAX?
Dunkirk.
Oh right, yeah.
Yes. Wow. I mean, imagine Hateful Eight wasn't playing here in 70mm, sadly, but we did see it in a CinemaScope aspect ratio at least.
Yeah, the thing about the real question I want to answer, like just in my opinion, is whether violence is an important part of storytelling, and what do you think?
Well, in the cases of like let's say Salo or Gruz 200, is it 200? Is it 300 cargo? Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Or what are I mean, Antichrist, I think wouldn't be a film worth watching without that violence, because it's so that's a challenging part of it, but it's the kind of thing which when I watch a film, I always know that there's actors, there's camera, there's lighting, there's sound, edited, etc. So when I see a film and it really makes me go, ugh, then I think that's pretty cool.
I think that's natural when it comes to Antichrist, though. I mean, I haven't watched it, and I know I should, and I need to, and Petar keeps saying, but I know of the worst parts of it, and would you say it's worse than a Serbian film?
The Serbian film isn't that bad. I mean, especially if you watch like Saw, even the same year Human Centipede came out. It's just the implications and scenario which makes people become uncomfortable. And whilst it is uncomfortable, it's still just a film.
Yes, it is just a film.
You're not actually watching incest, underage rape. It's just make believe.
Well, yeah, but the minds that construct these violent circumstances, like, I know that when I write a story, I don't need to have the violence.
Sorry, I just remembered, when you see something cute, like a kitten or something, you go, I just want to kill it, I want to strangle it, or whatever.
Yeah.
So, or like, well, eat its eyes. So, apparently, we do that because... It's fine. Apparently we do that because it's like an intrusive thought, and by saying it and by thinking it, we want to do it.
Yeah.
So it's to make sure that we don't do something bad. We end up saying it, like thinking about all the bad stuff we would do.
I
to
don't
get
know,
it out of the way.
I look at we have a pet snake, and I look at our pet snake and I think, oh, he's the cutest thing on the planet, but no one else would, because he's a snake.
Hattori Hanzo.
Little Hansi. I mean, he's great, but to look at him, I wouldn't think, oh, I want to eat you up. He's a predator. I watch him devour mice, and there's real life hyperviolence right there. The having a life in your hands and then giving it away. There's something really uncharacteristically satisfying about seeing one creature take control of another, and then. I don't know, does that make me a psychopath?
I was just thinking, are we psychopaths?
I don't think so. I have far too much empathy. Like, if some harm came to Hans, I'd be really upset. If we got a cat, for example, and the cat got Hans, I mean, I think Hans would give him a good go. Cats are luckily very afraid of snakes. But if Hans got a hold of or the cat got a hold of Hans, I'd be really pissed off at the cat, you know?
Yeah. Me
What?
too.
Yeah.
So I think we run out of time.
Oh, I don't feel like we've answered any questions. I just feel like we've just gone
On a sprawl.
On a sprawl, yeah, strangely, funnily enough.
Well, you know, see you maybe not next week because Christmas and stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna have a break, but we will be back probably around the before Christmas Day. We will have a sprawl. I think I'm gonna count down my top 10 best TV shows, and Petar is gonna count down his top 10 albums.
Yay!
Of the
music
year.
talk.
So if you're interested in hearing our top 10s, then make sure you listen to our next show. But thank you for joining us.
Yep. Love to everyone.
Peace.